Okay, so hello. I'm going to give you guys a quick introduction as to who it is that you're listening to. We had quite a few people sign up who might not even sort of know who the Gentle Sleep Specialist is. I'm Tara, aka the Gentle Sleep Specialist. I have been working with little ones now for about 17 years, and I have a very special birthday coming up. So that sort of gives you a hint as to how old I am and how long I've been working with little ones, if not even longer, to be honest. Yeah, probably 18 years or so now. Babies and children are my world. They are in my entire world. My children made my life better. There is nothing else to add to it. I am the most maternal human being I know. I have three little ones myself. That's them in the background, Scarlett, Tommy, and Charlie, who's now two and a bit, 2.5. And essentially, I began nannying. I was babysitting as soon as I could. I began nannying overseas, and I went in to become a pediatric, a registered nurse, and then went and specialised in pediatrics. So I worked as a peds nurse until I had my daughter, Scarlett, who's now 11. And she was a terrible sleeper, but more than that, she had CMPI, reflux, trapped wind. It was such a challenging time because it was everything I dreamt of. And even after having her, it was still more than what I dreamt of, the love and just the fulfillment. But at the same time, the experience in itself was really hard as a newborn. She was so unsettled. She had diarrhea up to 17 times a day. She was so refluxy. It was so tricky. And at 4 months, she was sick, and I didn't realize how sick she was. She had, because of her reflux being so bad, it was coming up to the back of her nose. So I just thought she had a cold because she had temps as well. But because she had a runny nose, I didn't realize that she had a UTI. And because here's the deal, here was the deal breaker. She was 4 months old. Our sleep was terrible, right? It was so bad that I thought she was up all night crying just because she was always that unsettled, right? And then at that point, I thought, no, I'll get her to the GP because her temps had been going for more than 24 hours. And yeah, they before I knew it, she had a kidney infection from a UTI. So she was 3 days into a UTI and had gone to her kidneys. And I remember being in such despair because I was a nurse. I should have picked it up. But at the same time, nothing was settled. I couldn't tell the difference between day and night. Like, she was so unsettled anyway. I thought her reflux was the runny nose. Like, I didn't realize it was her milk coming up because she was so unwell, etc. And so that for me was a turning point. My friend said, use a sleep consultant. This was 11 years ago. They weren't as big a thing back then. I used one. It changed everything because her tummy settled. She was feeding better. She wasn't screaming in the car. She was sleeping well at night. I knew the things that triggered her, and that made reflux worse. And that is how the story began. And then I went and trained. And since then, I've become a circle of security parenting facilitator and worked with families now for 10 years around the globe on little ones, sleep, settling, behavior, all the things. So today we're going to be primarily focusing on 3 months through to 2.5 years. If your little ones are in a cot, co-sleeping, bassy, that sort of idea. If they're in a bed and they're a toddler getting out, that's another webinar. But we're going to focus on that time. Now, if you've joined and you've got a 10-week-old, 8-week-old, the reason why I said from that age is because you're going to learn everything coming up over the next few weeks and months that you can apply ongoing, and it's life-changing. So we're going to talk first into day structuring. So essentially looking at our day structure. So what is it that looks like for our little ones? Now, there's a lot of noise out there about, capping first nap, 2-hour, next nap, 7 till 7, this sort of jazz. I want you guys to forget about all these set times, right? I want us to stop trying to play God when it comes to our little ones' sleep and manipulate this and that. There is a time, yes, there is times where you need to cap naps or things like that. So for example, if you've got 3 naps a day and if you don't cap nap 2, you can't fit nap 3, but your little one's not ready for the 2 naps yet, for example, right? Or if you don't cap their 1 nap a day, it pushes bedtime to 9 p.m. Of course, we want to cap, right? But as a general rule, I sort of say we want waking anytime from 5:30 onwards through to 7:30 a.m. And we want bedtime somewhere between typically 6 or just before 6 through to 7:40-ish, around there, 7:45. Now, if you've got a newborn or a 3-month-old, it's very common and their bedtime might be a bit later, but slowly we want to bring that earlier. But it's very common when they're in the newborn part. Our little ones become so I want you to just remember those times. Then structuring during the day, my preference is to run a feed, a play, and a sleep, a very loose one. If your little one will not feed, play, sleep because they only feed to sleep, we will get to that, right? But rather than staying, and especially as your little one comes to 4 months and above, rather than staying on set for like 3 hourly feeds or that sort of thing, moving to a loose feed, play, sleep can be really beneficial, because it means that your little ones have the ability to have a good feed. It doesn't matter if they're dropping naps, more awake time, it doesn't clash, right? When you stay 3 hourly, it's going to clash at some point. Plus, like, you just find yourself counting like watching the clock, being like, oh, you know, I have to do this. And then it gets trickier to drop the feeds. Whereas if you stay on a bit of a loose feed, play, sleep, it just is a pattern that you can foresee for so much longer moving forward. And it also stops you from running into the constant feed near sleep, which can then become, I will only feed to sleep, or I will only feed around sleep. And so having that sort of loose structure is my preference, focusing on nap 1 and 2 where possible. So nap 1 and 2 are essentially what we want to call like our primary naps of the day, right? So they're the ones that we want to focus on being more than an hour when we can. As they become 9, 10 months and older, we then shift to having 1 long nap and 1 short nap. Now, a lot of people put their emphasis on that being a middle nap. There's actually no reason specifically for that. In fact, most people find, and you guys might agree, that your first nap of the day is typically the one they'll take the easiest, the one that they might extend. It just tends to be the one that we want to nourish. Now, what happens is nap 5 drops off. And the best way I tell clients to think of this, especially when it comes to transitioning to dropping naps, is that if you guys remember, I'm a little bit older. If you remember The Price is Right, there was Larry Edna, and they had the goat that followed the man, and the goat dropped off the cliff, right? And the best way to explain this, I've got a pen and paper today because it's just a good way to explain things, right? Is that if you've got this cliff and your naps are on this cliff, so let's just say you're starting with 4 naps across your day, right? Eventually what happens is the awake time moves out and this 4th nap drops off the edge of the cliff, right? So suddenly you don't have this nap, but you've got these 3 naps. So then when that happens, when you lose a nap, you want to pull your naps out a little bit. So they just shuffle out, right? Eventually you drop your 3rd nap. It makes no sense to me that suddenly for some reason we're then dropping first nap and moving this one out, right? Typically what happens is that the naps shuffle along, drop off, shuffle along, drop off, shuffle along, drop off. So it makes sense to me more so that nap 2 shuffles along because that's the one that spans out a bit and then drops off, and nap 1 is the one that's slowly being pushed out to become your 1 nap of the day, for example, right? So just keeping that in mind. If you're doing this structure where you've put a lot of focus in nap 2 and it's working well, that's the other thing, guys. Firstly, I'm going to say always follow SIDS safe guidelines or safe sleep guidelines. And the second thing is if you're doing something and it is working well, I am not here to change it. So don't feel like you've got to make changes. But a lot of people feel a lot of pressure to drop a nap when in fact, it's actually very normal for this one to become their 1 nap of the day, right? And so and it's also very normal to not have a big chunk 2-hour nap in the middle of the day, and then a short first nap. It's very normal, for example, to have 2 naps, you know, that are somewhat decent between nap 1 and 2, right? So anything an hour or more is considered not a cat nap. So it's considered a better or a decent nap, right? So it's hour 15, hour 20, hour and a half. So if you are stuck in a room trying to get your little one to go to 2 hours on a midday nap, please don't stress about that, okay? Now, from 9 to 10 months onwards, of those 2 naps, you typically then find that one of them gets shorter and you only need 1 long, 1 short. And that's when I like the 1 long in the morning and then the shorter one in the afternoon. And then that's just your bridge to bedtime, right? And so keeping that in mind. And then once your little ones become between 14 and 19 months, that's typically when we transition to the 1 nap a day, right? And so somewhere along there, we're transitioning. So your nap 1 and 2 are where we want to put the emphasis on. They're the ones that tend to be naturally more extended. Then your later naps of the day can just be cat naps. Again, if you've got a young baby, you might find their last nap of the day is the really long one. There's no problems with that. You don't have to like wake them or stop it. There's no issues with that. But as they get older, that nap's going to drop. So it's typically the earlier ones that we just put a little bit more emphasis into seeing extended. Now, when it comes to cat napping, I will get on to the reason and the cause and all the things to support that, getting rid of those cat naps. But yeah, so the other thing is before the naps is that we typically find that before your earlier naps of the day, so before your first nap especially, you need a lesser awake time. So let's just say you've got a 5-month-old or nearly 6-month-old, that sort of age, who's on 2 hours awake time on average. You might find that before first nap, they only need hour 50, hour 45, or they might be on more than that. They only need 2 hours before first nap. Then before the next naps, maybe 2 or 3 naps, they might need up to 2 hours, 2 hours 15, right? And then before bed, it drops back just a tiny bit. So I'd sort of do it like this. It's a little bit before first nap, bit more, especially before the later nap. It's what I call the a-hole nap, the later nap of the day. I'll explain why in a minute. And then it just drops a tiny bit before bed. Not as much as before first, but just a little bit before bed. That's the typical pattern that we tend to see. Again, if your babe makes a bigger chunk of wake time before their bedtime sleep, that's not uncommon as well. It's okay. This is just a sort of guide. You might find that you've got a little less before first and then it goes out and then it stays out, before bedtime. Any of those sort of sequences are okay. Just having that general understanding. Now, when you're trying to get on top of sleep habits, the first thing that I want you to do is track over a few days. How many naps a day does my little one have? And especially if you're looking at bringing bedtime forward a little bit, right? Because what tends to happen is that little ones become very accustomed to a certain amount of awake time and a certain amount of naps in their day. You guys know I'm obsessed with the Bambi app. This is what I've been a part of. And a big part of this app is predicting. It's saying, this is the pattern. This is how many sleeps your little one does. For example, in the day, here's their next awake time. Here's what they're doing. These are the patterns that we can see, right? And it's literally there in this app. It tells you when your next nap is. It tells you awake times. It now knows how many naps your little one does. It has it in a graph that's easy to read. So the reason I'm even talking about this is I want you guys to understand, okay, my little one's awake time is around about this. How many naps a day they have is around about that. Because when your little ones drop their sleeps, right? And you'll hear me mention the app, guys. It's not to sell it. It is literally just because some people actually are like, I genuinely want the guesswork taken out. So if your little one is on 4 naps a day, let's just say, and bedtime's being around 7:30, right? 7:30 p.m., right? Suddenly we drop this last nap, right? What happens is then we're stuck with 3 naps. Now, guys, this is interchangeable if you're working with 2 naps, 1 nap, whatever, right? Suddenly when your little one drops a nap, bedtime looks like it should be 6 p.m., right? Because otherwise, to get to 7:30, we've got this big 3-hour or so awake time, just pretend, right? This big awake time. So when it comes to nap transitions, really importantly, what I want you to do is understand, okay, well, my little one's been on 4 naps. And when you know that, you can then work with that, or 3 naps, whatever it is, right? Even your newborns, if you're working with a 10-week-old and you want to bring their bedtime forward, you must first work out how many naps they are having in that day. Because what happens is people try and bring bedtime forward too quickly, and then they think the baby thinks you're putting them down for their 5th nap or their 4th nap, and they won't go down. Okay. So one of the big things with bedtimes being difficult or nap transitions ruining sleep is often that we've tried to then bring bedtime to 6 p.m. They think you're trying to settle them for nap 4 in bed. So that a-hole nap, which is essentially gone, they think you're trying to keep and put them to bed, right? So you're like, I've dropped naps, I don't want them to get overtired, but what I would do is span a little bit. So this nap goes out a little bit, this nap goes back a little bit, this nap goes back a little bit. So bedtime is a little bit earlier, but it's not crazy earlier. So when it comes to nap transitions and when it comes to baby sleep or making changes, understand what their naps they're on. Understand what awake time. To get the best awake time, I sort of say pair some observation with general awake times. Your general awake times could be on a guide. It's on that app, for example. You can find it where you need to, right? Then you pair it with observation. What you're looking for in that time is the calm before the storm. So when they're starting to disengage, they're starting to not pay attention to things, they're losing interest. If you can spot that, that's great. If you can't, what I would do, I'll give you some more tips on this in a minute, but what I would do is pay attention to how their settle goes, how their sleep goes, based on what awake time you've used, and use your general guide, right? So use, like I mentioned, whichever way you're going to work out their awake time, use that, right? So you have a general understanding of their awake time, you're pairing that with some observation, right? So that is how I recommend transitioning and moving, is that when you're dropping naps, you're making sure you're not suddenly just cutting the naps, just gone all of a sudden. The other thing is that little ones with poor sleep habits, they tend to seem like they're alert, they're FOMO, they just don't want to sleep, blah, 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 like all the things. Their dad has ADHD, or their grandma, so maybe it's that. But honestly, guys, what I can say is that little ones with poor sleep habits tend to seem like they don't need sleep. They also tend to drop naps way too soon, right? Because when your little ones have bad sleep habits, it's hard enough getting them to sleep when they actually need to go to sleep. You're like, you are so tired, go to sleep, right? Let alone when you're trying to get them down for a 5th nap of the day, right? Or a 4th nap of the day, or a 3rd nap of the day. So that's why I call it the a-hole nap. Is typically the last nap of the day is a little bit trickier to get, right? It doesn't mean they don't need it. Think of it as a little bridge to bedtime. And the longer we can keep our bridges, the better, okay? Without being ridiculous. We don't then want bedtime at 9:30 at night, but you know what I mean. So don't be in a rush to drop the naps. Try a little bit more awake time before you do drop a nap, and go like, do they still need nap 2 in the day? They are only 13 months old, maybe they still need nap 2, even though they're fighting it. So then I'd be looking at, okay, well, what's happening? Are they up all night and they're not waking up till 8 a.m. and that's what's knocking off their nap 2? Do they just need more awake time before their nap 2, for example, or their last nap of the day? Is it that we could still get nap 4, for example, if that's your last nap of the day, by going in the car, pram, carrier for that nap, or having a contact nap? That's totally okay for that last nap of the day as well, right? So I'd really be assessing, how can we keep this nap a little bit longer? Then I would also be looking at their awake times, adding a little bit of awake time, doing it straight out and about, and then making sure bedtime doesn't fall too far early, too quickly. And once you've sort of got that side of things under wraps, from there is when I'd be like, okay, we've tried this, we've maybe kept it a little bit longer. Now it's time to go. Now we need to add a bit more awake time before the other naps to span the naps out a little bit, so we don't suddenly have this huge chunk before bedtime. Okay, so that can be, that's just really important to keep in mind when it comes to transitioning naps, and keeping an eye on, how many naps your little one is on can be really beneficial to be able to make change first, okay, and just their general awake time. Now, I'm just going to check, because I had a question, so I'm just going to check. Okay. Yeah, okay. So, next thing, if your little ones wake earlier in the morning, super early than they're used to, they'll sometimes need a little less awake time. If they wake really late in the morning, they'll sometimes need a little bit more awake time. Alrighty, so keep an eye on that. If your little ones have a super long nap, they might need a tiny bit more awake time. If they have a short nap, they don't always need a little less awake time. They can, but sometimes they become very accustomed to a specific amount of awake time. So you can try a little less, but if you find that then they're still catnapping or they're fighting it, try keeping it out and see how you go. Now, the way your babies wake from their sleeps can give us an indication. So if your babies wake at 30 minutes, crying really hard after a short nap, with one that's meant to be longer, it might mean they've gone to bed a little bit overtired. So you could just trial a little bit less awake time. It's typically either going to be that, or it's that they've fallen asleep with one thing. So you're rocking, dummy, feeding to sleep, and they've woken up and it's gone, missing. They've come out of the sleep cycle, startled, something's, and it's almost like they sleep with one open and they don't get into those really deep, restful sleeps, right? So keep an eye on what they're using to fall asleep, and then, of course, how they wake up. If they wake up closer to 40, 45 minutes, 50 minutes, and they're happy, they're alert, they're just whinging, they're on and off, they're quiet, they're okay, it may mean that they need more awake time before they go to bed. But equally, if they don't have the skill to be able to put themselves back to sleep or get into a deep sleep from the beginning, that could also be playing a role, but keep an eye on those two characteristics, right? And that's where tracking, I sort of recommend, so for example, if I'm using the app, we have like when they wake up, what mood they're in, because it can be it can give us some hints as to how, what it is, more over or under, I'm tired. Then from there, when it comes to, so essentially what we're doing from there is then we're looking at, now we want to make some changes, right? I want to also talk about sleep pressure. So anytime we're making changes, there's a few things that are a must. A decent awake time, so not being too far off their awake times, teaching self-settling and teaching the ability to go into their sleep space awake. But most of all, really importantly, is sleep pressure. Now, I'm going to show you a drawing of what I mean by sleep pressure. And guys, if you're here to make changes, this part is really, really important. And it is so important if you're getting sleep refusal. A lot of babies and a lot of people contact me with newborns especially, and they'll say, my little one is just not sleeping. In the day, they're going 5 hours awake time, or my babe's got FOMO and they can make crazy awake times. This is typically the reason why, right? Now, what happens is that our little ones in their awake time, I'm going to pretend this awake time is 2 hours. Let's just say it could be 3 hours, whatever you want it to be, right? I'm going to pretend it's 2 hours. Now, if I am working with a client, what we do is we get their little ones to have a little bit of a wake time when they first get up, so 10 or 15 minutes. Then we offer a feed, right? They've had their feed. If they're having solids, they can have solids somewhere, at this point. So they're having their meal at this point, that sort of thing, right? They have their feed, then they've got their play, and then they've got their sleep, right? So of this awake time in the 2 hours, if they have a feed that even went for 10 or 15 minutes, let's just say, they've still got a good hour and 45 to play and expend energy and build up an appetite for sleep. What happens with a lot of our babes who are refusing sleep, or if we're making change to sleep, this is so important, is that during the day when you can try and get to something like this, if your little one's used to feeding to sleep, you might even do one side offering there and one side offering here, for example, right? But they should be shorter, if there's only one side on each. But what happens for a lot of our babes is that they have, instead of just the one offering, they have another offering, or they have an offering right before they're due to go to sleep, right? Or they're on the feeds for half an hour, right? So what happens is that our little ones, instead of having all this time to build up an appetite for sleep, they're playing, they're expending energy, et cetera, they're babbling, they're connecting with us, they're having one-on-one time, we're looking them in the eyes, they're able to play, like feel and touch and be all tactile, all those things. Instead of having that opportunity, they're spending a lot of extra time. This is why newborns are very dozy and then it's hard to get them down. Totally normal though. But from 3 to 4 months onwards, we want to start to be looking at, well, hold on, does my babe still need a 30-minute feed? And I've worked with micro preemies, babies with significant feeding issues, failure to thrive, underweight, poor latch, ties, you name it. I've worked with her in that respect. However, for the most part, this has become the habit, is the long feeds or multiple feed offerings. Think of it as a rest and reboot. So imagine giving your little one downtime where they're like resting, getting drowsy, getting dozy, chilling out right before they go to sleep. They're more likely to then reboot and have a hard time. It's like toddlers. Put them in front of the TV right before they go to bed. Guess who gets a big second wind in this time, right before bedtime? Right? Or they sit back in their chair, your 20-month-olds, they'll chill on their bottle for the last 15 minutes, or they'll have 4 books or 10 books in this last awake period, or, they've been told to wind their babies down so much that they're getting this second wind, right? So when you're making changes, we make it from the beginning of the night and we pay attention to in their awake time. So a lot of people say, just keep them awake and they'll pass out when they're ready. No, they won't. They'll just get overtired and adrenals will come on board and then they'll get poor sleep, right? And you'll pay for it. They might pass out at the beginning, but then they'll be up within, 2 hours and up all night, if not have a very early morning waking, right? The key is the right awake time, but in that awake time, we want them to have the ability to expend energy, to play, to connect, to, you know, expend that energy to learn, to roll, to use their muscles, to use their legs, to run around, to crawl around, to all the things. And in there, of course, will be a feed at some point, right? But we need to be mindful. The other thing is that if you're doing feeds that equal sleep, right, and it's working well, no worries. But if you're doing a feed or something that, you know, is getting them nice and drowsy, and every time you put them in their sleep space, they then fight sleep, we can see why. Babies don't know how long they've slept for. A lot of the times they're like us, they'll rest and reboot. Like, you guys know what it's like, right? I don't know if I'm the only one. I can't be the only one. I go and say goodnight to the kids. Sometimes I'll sit with Scarlett, have a chit chat for a while. I'm so tired at that time at 7:30 at night. I might even like fall asleep at points, like on her bed or, you know, whatever. Then I kind of get up and I get this huge second wind, right? I'm ready to go. People get off the couch. They'll sit on the couch, they'll joke on the couch, get up, then they can't go to sleep when they get to bed, right? The same idea. I just need to sit down for 5 minutes. You guys will have this experience. You've had your baby in the car. You think, yeah, I'll get home for the nap. They may have fallen asleep for 2 minutes. They may not have even fallen asleep. They've just been like this in the car, having a nice, relaxing car trip. Get home, you're like, bedtime, and then they won't go down, right? It's the second wind, and it's a biggie. So we have to pay attention to this before we consider making sleep changes, because do you know what a lot of people do when they work with sleep programs or consultants, etc., is they don't have any idea about this. And they're like, I've read a method, I've heard of FERPA, I tried this, I tried that, but they haven't paid attention to the lead up. They're still feeding right before sleep. Their babe's still drowsy or sleepy on feeds. They've had a car kip 2 minutes, and then they've tried to teach them to self-settle, and it's a disaster. And that's also where sleep help gets a bad rap, because then there's so much more crying, because our babies don't have that appetite to be like, I'm awake, and I'm asleep, you know? So keeping that in mind when you're making changes is really important. I would start at the beginning of the night. I'd do a feed maybe half an hour, 45 minutes before bed. Keep them awake on the feed, then have some more play and connection time. Don't stress about trying to get them sleepy state. Like, just have your normal play time. Then I'd be big smooch, big, you know, cuddle kiss, and then into their sleep space, right? Now, a lot of people say, but my little one will not feed effectively unless they're sleepy. And it's the chicken and the egg, right? Sometimes you've got to hold that out. So you've got to offer. If they won't feed well, you could offer maybe 10 minutes later. After that, I'd move on to play and then some sleep, and then work on sleep, right? You might then rock them to sleep. You might, you know, go for a drive to get them to sleep, to get them out, and not at night, but to get them out of that pattern for a few days where you're feeding away from sleep, but you're still like fully getting them to sleep, just to move away from that feed to sleep pattern and focus on that first. Okay. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is associations. So sleep associations. So essentially, when it comes to sleep associations, sorry, 2 seconds. So if you've got a little one who's 3 to 4 months old and they're taking 30 minutes to feed, I want you to either get see your GP, pediatrician, lactation consultant, child health, whatever you can, to get them to have a look and go like, and or you can have a look yourself and go like, do they need this, or are they just resting? Like, is this just a suckling time? Should I cap it at 20 minutes, see how they go? Should I cap it at 15 minutes, see how they go? Not under that, but, you know, and then just keep an eye on weight and nappies and things like that over the 24 hours, right? You might notice that their nappies might be a little less full. I'm talking like crazy less. And this isn't medical advice, guys, so you need to make sure you get proper support. But it's very normal if you're used to your little one feeding 2 hourly overnight. Some of my clients will say like, Tara, they've only had like their nappy isn't as wet. I'm like, that's because you're used to like a puddle of a nappy because they're excess feeding all night, right? It's just coming straight, you know, like it, of course, right? So it has to be relative. But if you start to notice, well, actually, when I do go to 15 minutes, they have a better settle, they're more awake on their feed, etc. And you might find that when your little ones are more awake and not just chilling on there for 30 minutes, you might find they don't even need to stay on for 30 minutes, right? Because they are just having a feed and then jumping off, okay? So we'd have that playtime into bed. Your energy around changing sleep habits matters. People are so worried about attachment and connection, and they should be, but not in relation to changing sleep habits. What I can tell you now is that my families are happier. Their little ones are happier. They are held like so well rested. When you think about it, we are not designed physically or emotionally or mentally for sleep deprivation. If it was so normal to be up every 2 hours, putting a breast back in quickly, putting a dummy back in, rocking on a fitball, then why do we desperately need more sleep than that? And why are we so at odds with our body and our mental health and our ability to be patient and our immunity and all the things if that is so natural and normal, right? Yes, little ones have normal infant sleep rhythms. And when they are younger, yes, they need more feeds, right? So we're not talking about newborns here. We're not talking about under 12-week-olds, right? Under three months-ish. We're talking about coming above that. And what we're talking about is not about actually even anything to do with attachment or connection, right? What it is to do with is learned patterns of association. So this is the next part is that we're talking about. And guys, this covers frequent night waking and catnapping. So at the end, I'm going to look through some questions. But if you say, my little one's waking every 2 hours and they're using a feed to get to sleep, I'm covering that now. Okay. It doesn't matter if they're using a dummy. It doesn't matter if, you know, Uncle Joe has whatever and we've got teeth or, you know, we're in the regression now. You can make really amazing changes to your little one's sleep. Honestly, if there's medical things involved, we always just say get checked out first and get, you know, the go ahead because we get referred to a lot from PCH, which is our major pediatric hospital here, by their cardiac area. And so we always say, if your babe's got a heart condition, had heart surgery, just get it checked out. We want that all clear. So of course, doing things like that. But when it comes to making changes to sleep, what you have to realize is that from around 3 to 4 months onwards, your little ones, essentially what happens is their sleep cycles become more defined. This is your 4-month sleep regression, so to speak, right? Now, they come out of one sleep cycle and they come to a more alerted point. That is preparing them to be a little bit older and a little bit further from mum, right? By like old school times, right? So we think about basically back in the days, they were in the jungle or whatever, and they had to have primal, like they had to be aware. There was more safety, you know, they had to be aware of where they were, the safety mechanism. So they come to these alert points after these sleep cycles, right? They check, everything is safe, everything is as it was, it's like a scan, and then they go back off to sleep. We all do it, even adults do it, right? We shouldn't really know about it, right? Unless it's a feed time and they're hungry and they're like, okay, I need a feed, that's fine, right? What we tend to find is that babes under 4.5 months, under 5 months might need 1 to 2 night feeds, right? Newborns, different story. They can feed as they need. From 3 to 5-ish months, 3 to 4.5 months, you might do 1 to 2 night feeds. 2 is still okay. From about 5 months onwards, 1 night feed is typically okay. Like I said, if you've been, you know, told to do more because of other issues, of course, that's okay. So they have then basically these alerted points. Now, when they come out of these alert points, what happens is for babes who have catnapping and frequent night waking is something's gone, missing, changed, or needed, right? So typically in some way, shape or form, there's either feeds falling too close to sleep. In their awake time, even if the feed was at the beginning of their awake time, they're using it to get nice and drowsy. And that's the cue. The brain's neural pathways like 1 + 1, feeding equals sleeping, feeding equals drowsy, you know, that sort of thing. Or they're using dummies to get to sleep, which aren't always bad. Some babes sleep well with them, some babes don't. They might be rocking to sleep. Again, some babes sleep well. There will be your friend who has the babe who's rocked to sleep, sleeps 11 hours, right? Temperament comes into play, and also how they manage the sleep in general. But then there's other babes who, if you do something in repetition, it becomes like they just hold on to it. They are like, that is what equals that, and that is how I get back to sleep, and that is what we do, you know. And when they come out of these sleep cycles, suddenly something's changed. They're now awake. They need to use whatever it was that they now associate with sleep to get back off to sleep again, right? And so the cycle continues. It tends to be worse in the second half of the night because our babes are naturally on lighter sleep in the second half of the night. I'm bringing back out my drawing again. So that's their awake point. This is their sleep cycle. In the first half of the night, first few hours, they tend to be in a deeper sleep more naturally. We all are, right? Then what happens is that from midnight, and even to be honest, earlier than that sometimes, 9 to 10 p.m., especially if they're overtired, or if they've got sleep habits, they tend to go on the lighter surface sleep. So let's just imagine during this time, they're drifting between sleep cycles, coming to an alert point, you know, they're checking. You're not going to get those wakings. But second half of the night, or if your babies are essentially sleeping with one eye open, so they've got really strong sleep props, and you notice they don't tend to get into a deep sleep, what you tend to find is instead of going back off to sleep, they're now awake. And now they get the call out, cry out, dummy come back in, then they go back off. And then they come to the next sleep cycle and they're now awake. Feed me again, and then back off. Oh, feed me or rock me, you know, whatever it is that their sleep habits are, right? And so then you're getting all these frequent wakings instead of them drifting to alert, to check, everything is as it was, back into the deep rhythm, right? This should be rhythmic. It should not be broken and disjointed and all that sort of jazz. So yes, little ones have normal, like baby sleep patterns, but the reason why some babies sleep beautifully is not because they're not attached, right? What about the poor parents who didn't do sleep training and their baby sleeps all night? Does that mean that they've never attached? Oh, your baby doesn't have normal infant sleep cycles. No, like we would be, if this was a developmental milestone that babies were supposed to sleep, you know, developmentally, we would know the age. People say like it's developmental. I'm like, okay, like crawling and walking and all the other things we're measuring and have some sort of awareness, because you tell the sleep deprived mum at 6 months old that it's developmental. When is that developmental thing? Because then there's the 3-year-old mum who's like, I'm still waiting. Then there's the one with the 6-week-old who's like, my baby's sleeping 11 hours at night, right? Like it doesn't make sense. That argument that it's like normal sleep. Yes, there's normal sleep patterns, but waking in order to do a particular thing in order to re-induce sleep has nothing to do with responsive attachment. It is habit. It is learned associations around sleep. Being responsive is so important, absolutely. And we will always respond to our babies because we love them and they are in good. If you're on this webinar, there's every chance you have a great, responsive, like loving home. There's every chance of that, okay? But the bottom line is that babies learn patterns. They are designed to learn, like to soak things in. Do you know how much learning they do in their first year? Because it brings safety. When they learn, okay, this plus this equals this, it basically means that they're in safety. Like it's what they become familiar with. Babies want what's familiar. We all do. Even as adults, we want what we know. So if they know that when mum does the rocking a certain way and dad can't do it, that's not about attachment. That dad might be very involved and it's interchangeable, right? It might be my mum, partner, whatever, right? You guys know that that person is a safe person. They're used to that person. But you might even try and stand and not rock and your baby might cry, right? Or you might try and be right there next to the cot, patting and shushing and doing all the things. And your baby's like screaming their face off as if they're being murdered until you pick them up, put them on the breast or pick them up, put the dummy back in and rock. You know what I mean? Like, it isn't about having to constantly prove that you're a martyr to sleep deprivation. And that's what then means that we've got an attached baby. Honestly, guys, attachment is an ongoing relationship of connection, interaction. It's crazy to me because we can also go to parents and go, how many times have you stopped and like laid and looked in your baby's eyes today and played and talked to them and put your phone down and all of that, right? Like if we want to talk about attachment and connection, like that is so important, right? Like having a boundary around sleep actually means that we have well-rested families. We are more likely to have a happier dynamic between mum and dad or mum and partner, whoever it is, right? We are more likely to have an emotionally responsive and present mother, a mother who is not at her wit's end, who is not just in survival, who's not having exacerbated postnatal depression, anxiety, psychosis because of sleep deprivation, right? Or who's not taking things out on her toddler, or who, you know, generally in the household, the babe's less irritable, the baby's crying less because they're able to cope in their awake times. You know, like mums stopping breastfeeding early, wanting daycare days, for example, because they're so burnt out, right? Because they're up all night. It is so not necessary to prove martyrdom when it comes to sleep deprivation. When mums are slept well, when parents are slept well, firstly, how important is it if you've got that relationship with a partner for that to be healthy? right? And I know sleep deprivation often, not always, but often makes that relationship really hard and strained, right? Resentful, all the things, right? But more than that, it also means that mums find it harder to be present, to be like, to really look forward to each day, to have that, just that easiness of like a deep rest. And a lot of people don't actually realize where they're at or how much it's impacted them because they're deep in it until they actually get sleep or until they actually don't have to spend hours in a room rocking, or, they can leave their babe for a moment and duck out to the shops. Like, then they're like, I actually didn't realize how far from like who I wanted to be or whatever it is that I actually am, right? And so the reason I talk about this, I don't want to come here and be like, here's all the tips, and then you guys go away and you don't actually understand, like, it's actually okay. It's actually okay to make sleep changes. Here's what's happening. It's just patterns. It's patterns of repetition, and your baby's become accustomed, and now that's their familiar, and changing that feels hard, because that's the other thing. Babies cry when we make changes to sleep. We can be supportive, you can wean. So if you're rocking dummy and bottle, you might try rocking with dummy and moving feed away first. Then after a while, you might try getting rid of the dummy and try rocking, for example. So you can wean things. We can do things very slowly, but typically because we're changing what's familiar, it feels uncomfortable. And it's also not what they want. It doesn't mean it's wrong. Okay. None of us like change. We all want the same, stay in the same job, same relationship, same everything, same patterns, same healthy patterns, same unhealthy patterns, because it's what our brain knows. And our brain actually doesn't specifically want what's best for us. Our brain wants what it knows because it didn't kill us. And let's stay with that because that was safe, right? So that's why we can stay in these bad things. And it feels like death trying to make changes, right? So that's the same for our little ones. So when we understand that that is what you're working with here, we can then look at, from the beginning of nighttime, we've kept our baby awake, they've built up sleep pressure, we've had connection time and play and looked into their eyes and all the things. Then we say, no, nice time, Barb, we're putting them in their sleep space, their safe sleep space. And from there, that's when I'd recommend a method. Now, some people like a pick up, put down style. I tend to find it really irritates babes and can make them so much more irritable, right? But the next thing that, so that might be an idea, right? So they might sort of say, if I'm like doing a pick up, put down, am I making my little one worse? Because again, we are attached and loving parents. We do not have to worry about attachment. Do you know what's really sad, guys? What's really sad is that little ones who are in horrific, ongoing, toxic levels of ongoing abuse and neglect, firstly, they only need one buffer system to change the path of their brain, like to actually support it, right? It's wild what it takes, right? But those children, and DCP people will say this, they still want to be with those people. So we're so far from attachment, and we need to remove that fear mongering, because we are killing mothers with sleep deprivation, and we are essentially destroying that time of early childhood for them by keeping them stuck by fear, right? Making changes to sleep is not going to touch that, right? So when we then put them down, we need to then pay attention to, from this mind of I'm okay, they're okay. This is going to feel uncomfortable because it's something different. It doesn't mean it's wrong. In fact, our babe's going to thrive, right? Our whole family is. And I can guarantee you, as you start to get to behavior as they're toddlers, you start to get to eating, fussy eating, all of that. You can imagine when a toddler's having milk all night, guess what they don't feel like during the day? A balanced diet. Right? You can imagine when a mum's sleep deprived all night and a toddler's irritable all day, because guess what? They don't feel like turning off the TV, because everything is harder when we are tired. So then what we do is we look at, am I making this better or worse? So is a pick up, put down really effective? What are they learning here, right? Could I do a by the cot? Yes, I can do a by the cot, put them in the cot, support them while they're there, right? But paying attention to, is what I'm doing actually making them better or worse? Do they like the patting that I'm trying to do? Are they appreciating the fact that I'm holding their back, patting them, or constantly laying the 21-month-old down or the 2-year-old down and trying to hold them down? All of that? No. I can nearly guarantee you are frustrating them, right? Because they aren't worried that they're suddenly in the rational footage. You are there supporting them. They want what they know, and they don't care for the lesser, which is why you can't always get away with no cry solutions, right? We want to try and slow it down. If we can try do weans, but some people say to me, I've been trying to get rid of the dummy for 17 days and they're so upset. I'm like, oh my God, just go cold turkey for the love of God and have a good method. Or they might sort of say, we've been trying to, swap from this to this prop and it's been so many days, right? We have to pay attention to, like, does this make sense? If I was doing this in any other way in my life, would I keep going with something that seemed pointless for 17 days, for example, right? So you have to have a solid plan. I'm not here to sell myself, but I am telling you, I have the solid plan if you need it. I really like, as in if you need things broken down more bit by bit, and it's on sale at the moment for $139. Okay. So if you are like, Tara, I just need like the intricates, we can get that to you. But basically, guys, having that way, this is the way that we're going to do it. We're in the room, we're going to give support. For example, what's making it better or worse? Does the verbal help? Can I just sit there and just be of presence by the bed? We put a hand through the side of the cot instead of over the cot. If you find your 10-month-old's pulling up and getting more frustrated, that you're right there and trying to hold onto your arms, for example. So really paying attention to that. I can just put my hand through, do a pat of the mattress, and be a really calming, confident force of response, right? As soon as you enter into the hysteria of it, so you're holding them down, picking them up, putting them down, like, you know, all the things, right? They will feel that. I'm okay, you're okay. Everything is okay. We're just making changes around sleep. And I know, baby, I know it feels so uncomfortable to begin with, but I promise you I wouldn't do this if I didn't think that I really feel like this is going to be for what's best. And that will be your job until the end of time with your children. And this is the reason why this feels uncomfortable, is because sleep help is actually the first time that you have to put that into place. As your toddler's like, get older, you will do it again and again and again. And I want you guys to get used to holding boundaries, not even just with babes, but as they get older. It is so important for our toddlers around sleep that they have boundaries. We must think of love, and then we must think of boundary. It's so interconnected. It's so close on that chart, right? Because our little ones thrive when they have sturdy leaders. If we are baby-led everything and we're following our toddler's lead and they're running the show, it is chaos in their brain and it feels really unsafe. You are letting your little ones feel unsafe on behalf of being passive in order to not hold a boundary or not upset your baby. You might not upset them in that moment, but there is a consequence to that. It is just the way it is, right? So I want you guys to learn from this too. As I get to an 18-month mark and all the requests start coming in, one more book, one more drink, one more this, one more that, get good at saying, no, Baba, I'm sorry. I know you want one more drink. I've heard you. I'm acknowledging you. I'm, appreciating what you want and why you want it. But my boundary is there. It is bedtime. We've had 3 books. We're not having any more, sweetie, right? Because then your child goes, I'm in child. They're in sturdy leader. I can sit back in the back of the car and know that my driver's got this, right? Like, what a freaking gift to give to our children. And too many children these days do not have that gift. Firstly, because everyone's too busy and too burnt out. But secondly, because everyone is scared of crying or making anyone uncomfortable. And oh my God, I've heard that they're going to get anxiety. You are far more likely to have ongoing issues when your little ones grow up in a home without sturdy leaders, right? And sturdy is kind, but it is also very, very secure and confident in the decisions that they make that are really for their children's well-being. So, and I had to learn this, guys. I am the most loving human being. You know what? If I'm going to be really honest, I have a therapy session at 1 o'clock today. Do you know what for? Because I'm about to turn 40. I can't even talk about it without being emotional. And I can't deal with the fact that that part of my life of having little kids is now, they're getting bigger and it's amazing and it's all good. But I never don't want to be in this time in my life. And I feel like I can't turn 40 because, I'm not going to have any more kids now. And I feel like, how do I leave this chapter and know that my kids are getting older? So if you want to know you're in loving hands with somebody who loves and is obsessed with children, you're in the right place, because I'm getting therapy as to how I can not love a little less, but just not actually just survive with the fact that, and I'm so blessed that I'm getting older, and I'm so blessed that I'm watching my children get older. So please don't get me wrong, guys, but that is my heart. My heart is that I never want to be in a position where I'm not the needed or I'm not their world and they're not mine, right? Yeah. So anyway, so when we're doing this, we're paying attention to what's making them better or worse. Is it better when I, for example, move back away from the bed a bit so they're not just so focused on that? Over a few days, if you are in the room, can you slowly wean away? Can you slowly wean back and then eventually get to a point where you're doing more of a step in and step out? So each day, even though your little one might not like that specific change when you move to the middle of the room, for example, can I move back just a tiny bit? Can I do a little bit less physical? Maybe just going over like every 2 to 3 minutes from within the room. So you're still in the room, right? Can I, so just having a way of lessing and lessing, or some people might choose more of this step in and step out sort of process. So where they put their little one down, they step out, they give them a couple of minutes and go back in, right? So things like that can be really beneficial as well. If you still want to be very frequently, you can still be very frequent in, but some people find that when they're in the room, it actually makes them worse, right? And so paying attention to that, if when I'm going in, like how is that going for my little one, right? And then reapplying throughout the night, unless it is feed times, right? Or unless, of course, you're worried you're straight in there. So just giving that little bit of space to like seeing, are they going to settle? Do they need me to step in? If they're just having a bit of a whinge, watch them on the monitor, obviously making sure they're okay, not stuff all the things. And then, of course, you can obviously go in and support from there, right? Or you either move back to being in, or you move to your step in, step out, or you pick up, put down. But again, I'd just be mindful of that sort of method when they're above 3 to 4 months. So keeping that in mind for your night times. Now, daytimes would be then the same. So I'd start night one, then go into day one. But for your daytime naps, I'd probably try for 20 or 30 minutes. If they're not settling, I'd use an alternative method just to get them to sleep, or take a little break and try again, right? So just for another 10 minutes. You do not need to be stuck in a room for 2 hours trying to get them down for their sleep, okay? I don't want that to be happening at all. And you should also, everyone asks me, how long should I let them cry for at night or whatever else? I don't answer that on these, because I need to know you're using a really effective method for your little one. And actually just keeping, like, even on the program I was talking about before, I'm in the Facebook group answering questions every day. So if somebody's in there, and every single question, so if somebody's in there and like, hey, Tara, my little one's having a really hard time, it's been 3 days. I'm like, no, stop. Let's do this. Can you do this? Like, it shouldn't be like that, right? So I want to be across everybody in terms of making sure that little ones aren't having an ongoing tricky time with settling, because it shouldn't be the case. So then what we do from there is, for the day naps, in order to get rid of catnapping, for a few things: right awake time, building sleep pressure. The next thing is this self-settling ability. If they have the ability to be able to put themselves off to sleep, not only are they then going to get into a better sleep rhythm, right? They almost just let everything go and relax, as opposed to like, where's the breast? Don't waking on transfer. So they get into a better sleep rhythm from the beginning. But when they come out of a sleep cycle, they're more likely to do that quick drift back off to sleep. That's the key, because nothing's missing. The dummy's not gone. They're not having to wake to find it. Mum's not stopped the pat, whatever it is, right? And then they're more likely to drift back off into the next sleep, especially after a while, once they practice the nighttime. So once they start to practice that night resettles, they'll put that better into the day. So catnapping can take a good 2 weeks or so, like once they've started to get the hang of that self-settling, but then you're paying attention to their general awake times, how they're waking up. So keeping a track of that on the app, on logging whatever you want to do, right? So how they're waking up, that sort of thing. Because if they're really upset after 30, you might try a little bit less, right? So you can pay attention to the awake time. You could trial a few different awake times, especially if your babes are waking up not too upset and you think, oh, they might need a bit more awake time, right? So you could add 5 to 10 minutes, for example, to see how that's at. But it's the teaching of that initial self-settling into the cot, wide awake, being able to go off to sleep, that makes a really big difference when it comes to being able to transition and get back off to sleep from nap times. I can't stress that enough. It's a biggie, alrighty? So that in itself, same with early morning waking. Early morning waking is typically that they've come into this light surface of sleep at 4:30 a.m. and suddenly trying to get them back to sleep again becomes really hard, because now they're wide awake at that time, just like at the end of a nap, right? So the early morning waking can even be overtiredness, so keep an eye on that if you are having it overtiredness, if they're freezing, but remember, we'd rather cool than warm. But if they're really cold, but more so it's about that ability to be able to drift between these sleep cycles in the early hours, rather than have to wake up. Now they're awake, it's much harder for them to get back off to sleep again. And how you manage. So when you've got a catnap, when you've got an early morning waking and they're not due for a feed, then or if you're managing catnapping, giving them the opportunity to see if they go back to sleep. That might be by you going back in there. It might be by you just waiting a little bit and watching on the monitor and making sure they're okay, but just giving them a bit of space and time if they're not too upset, to see if they'll go back off. Or it might be like your step in and step out, for example, but not just getting them up straight away, but alternatively not spending an hour trying to get them back to sleep from a cat nap. You can give them time and space, because we don't want to just straight up, especially even if they're happy. If they're happy and okay after a cat nap, you could leave them for up to 20 minutes to see if they'll just drift back off. But a lot of people think because they've woken happy, they're done. It's not the case. So keeping a close eye on that as well, like, can we give them a little bit of space to see if they'll go back off to sleep, is really important as well, right? So those sorts of things for those extensions are really super important as well. And then basically, yeah, so then if you're making big transitions, so for example, if you've got a little one and you're co-sleeping with your babe, if you want them in their own sleep space, great, then I would start from the beginning of the night, and you might even start rocking first and then transfer them, rock transfer right into this, just to get them adjusted to that sleep space over a couple of days. Some people go straight from co-sleeping, then at nighttime with all the other things go straight into that. But if you're doing that, I would recommend having the program where you've got a set plan as to how, like, what method you really are going to use. So it's up to you guys to, if you sort of think, right, like, I really want to move away from co-sleeping, you can do it incrementally. So that rocking down, that sort of ideal, feeding down into their safe sleep space. But if you decide, no, I want to do it from the beginning of the night, then you can. If you want to get rid of constant rocking, feeding to sleep, having to stand up and rock whilst co-sleeping and keep co-sleeping, it's a little bit trickier. I don't really guide on it, because firstly, it's more just like me trying to find that fine line between wanting to support moms but also having to watch legally with Sid Safe. But the biggest thing is that I would say, if your little ones are next to you, can you see if they will just, like, can you give them the opportunity to go back off? Can you do a little bit less by just doing a pat next to you, for example, rather than a pick up and rock, each time? Because a lot of people are under this false premise that, like, if we co-sleep, they'll just sleep all night. But a lot of times they're still wanting to feed every 2 hours. They're still wanting parents to stand and rock 2 hourly, that sort of thing. So it's really important to keep that in mind, that it's not always what people like necessarily think, in terms of it's, it's so fair that co-sleeping doesn't always work and you need to still make change. So keep that in mind. So I'm going to get to some questions now, because there's so much to learn usually. Yeah, so Anonymous has written, babes waking up at night and won't settle. So usually you have to make the change, guys, from the beginning of the night. So a lot of people say to us, Tara, I don't need you to come to my house because the beginning of the night's great. I just want to stop this waking. You can't spot fix. If you feed your babe close to sleep at the beginning of the night, or if they feed close to sleep, or they're a bit drowsy on feeds, or use feeds for lengthy feeds, etc., then you really want to pay attention to, is that why they're then waking during the night? Because you can't then just go during the night and be like, right, now I'm not feeding you back to sleep. So doing that and having a solid method for the resettle and the initial settle is so important. Yeah. So Kobe, I would be looking at your little one, firstly, maybe needing a fourth nap for a little while if they are going to bed with too much awake time or too tired, which may be the case, this tiredness. The other thing is that I'd say that your little one's got props. So your baby's relying on something to get back off to sleep, and or in there not getting into a deep sleep because something's playing a role, most likely. So the other thing is, guys, is you need to make the changes to the beginning of the night and during the night feeds and get to a reasonable amount of night feed. So for a 6-month-old, 1 night feed, for example, even if you get to 2, if they're used to 2-hourly feed, 2 night feeds, and then work on the feeds during the day the next day. That'll help so much. Whereas if you're during the day, you're like, right, if I can get enough into them today so I can start tonight, you probably won't find that happens. You'll probably just find that you end up stuck in this cycle of waiting to get a good feed day. Whereas really, if you start at night and start on the resettles and working on not feeding all day, then usually you'll get better sleep throughout the day. Now, just going to touch on this too. When your little ones are coming to 18 months and above, we really want to make sure we are limiting screens for so many reasons. One is that when you have screen time, right, this is really, really important, guys. They are more likely to have like issues then with focus, attention, being present in play, behavior, sleep, all the things. It doesn't just give them second wind. It inhibits their melatonin. It causes big issues with behavior, focus, attention, etc. It is so important that they are kicking balls, they are playing, they are using their little fine motor skills, they are imagining, they are using wonder, creation, imagination. Like, I cannot stress it enough. They're using social skills, they're using their problem solving skills, they're digging, they're doing all the things. All the play and connection and outdoor time that you can have is the most nourishing childhood for your little ones. So toddlers need that. They need your connection time. If you're getting home from daycare and everything's a rush and we haven't had a chance to just be, you have to recollect your children after daycare or after school, things like that, to be back in family, back in presence, back in bodies, back with us. Their caregiver, their primary caregiver. That is what makes healthy minds. Okay, we're worried about, if we do sleep training, blah, blah, blah. No, we need to make sure we're collecting our kids. We're bringing them back into presence. We've got slower days. We're letting them be bored. We're letting them play. We're letting them outdoors. That is what is going to make such a big change for our toddlers, making sure that they're not getting that second wind. As they get older, if you're looking at, okay, well, they're still sleeping for 3 hours and they're 2.5, like maybe we're just going to try capping naps first. Again, I wouldn't suddenly drop a nap. I'd just try shortening the nap first and seeing if then bedtime gets easier. But if your toddlers are refusing bedtime, I'd be looking at where's the boundaries, having a stamp chart, like brushes teeth, pajamas on, that they're stamping, they feel autonomous, they feel big kid. And then they're going into the bedtime from there, right? So they're stamping off their chart, they're feeling all big, all of that sort of thing. They've built up sleep pressure, they've had outdoor playtime, no screen time, connection time. It doesn't have to be much, but it has to be, right? They've had that connection time. Mix up your bedtime routine. Don't make it 6 boring requests like brush teeth, pajamas on, to just get to a boring bedtime. Like nobody wants that. Go and get their dinosaur and be like, I'm going to brush my teeth with dinosaur, and dinosaur's brushing his teeth. It sounds like it's harder work. It's not. It's hard work being in a constant tug of war with your toddler. So making it fun. Do a bath straight after kindy and then have dinner, like mixing it up a little bit on days, trying not to just become a drill sergeant at 5 p.m. because they're tired. They don't have that capacity there at that point, right? Then sturdy. No, we've said this. I understand you're upset. Their job is to have their big feelings. Your job is to have your boundary in a kind way, right? It's not to shame. It's not to get like shouty, all the things as best as we can. It is to say, I know that you want this, but this is where it's at. Now, the more you get involved in that dialogue of back and forth, that's when we get frustrated and our cup overfills. But instead, you just stay sturdy. I've said no, sweetie. I know that you want that, but I've said no. Whereas if you start to negotiate, then it gets frustrating, then it's back and forward, it drags on. That subject has been left. There's no more books. That subject doesn't need touching on. We don't need to try and negotiate with something better or different. It's just a no, right? And then we can try and move them through to the next activity with some fun and some positivity and that sort of thing. But that boundary stayed, right? In a really kind and firm way, okay? You should be seeing change within a few days, just to answer the feed to sleep, like within 2 to 3 days if we're doing it right. So with your toddler, it is about that lead up. It is about the sleep pressure. It is about screens, connection, playtime, then a sturdy boundary around that bedtime settle. And then they go into their cot or sleep space. And then we go into the method, one of the methods. So Liz said, do you put them down wide awake? Is this before glassy-eyed? It depends what glassy-eyed is for your little one. I would just say where you sort of feel like their awake time is. So if their awake time is 2 hours, you don't put them down before that. You put them down at 2 hours. So no, you're not jumping at first signs when they're actually due. And if it takes them a little while to fall asleep, that's okay. But if they're really upset, then I'd be looking at, was the awake time right? And how are we managing that settle? So Steph, knowing the difference between waking to feed at night and not is typically we sort of do more age. So we sort of go, okay, well, it's a 6-month-old. Do they need 3 feeds a night? No, 1 should be suffice, or max 2 if they're closer to 5 months, that sort of thing. So it'd be more about that. Yeah, so your 10-month-old absolutely would be in habit just for the waking 1 to 2 hourly wanting feeds. Yeah, so Cindy sort of mentioned her 8-week-old has like the gurgling, swallowing. To be honest, Cindy, I would just see your GP or a pediatrician because your babe might need a bit more like, might need medicating or something like that. And I'm not allowed to guide on raised sleep positions. So, hun, I would say that's more of a medical thing to sort of get, some support with. No, yeah. So I would try the nap, Abby, with your 2-year-old. Absolutely. I'd try the nap. So yeah, so false start. So Abby, go back to just a nap. I do an hour 15, but then I'd be looking at sleep pressure and making sure your 2-year-old has closer to 5.5, 6 hours awake time. So false starts are typically either bedtime's too early for your babe, especially if they've just dropped a nap and it's suddenly become earlier. Try an extra nap and a later bedtime, typically really helps, or a bit more awake time before bed, and look at what they're using to get to sleep. So if you put your baby down and they play happily for hours on end, they have lost sleep pressure. I can guarantee you nearly that you're either going way too early. So if you're putting a 9-month-old down after an hour and a half, yes, they're just not ready. But if you know, okay, I put my 9-month-old down at 3 hours, they're ready, but they play for hours or could play for hours, that is somewhere in that awake time, car, pram, feeds, or right before they've been drowsy. They've lost that sleep pressure. Either that or they just don't know how to go to sleep yet. And when you manage it effectively, but it's typically about losing that sleep pressure. How do I differentiate between how do I know to get rid of the dummy? So guys, I'm going to show you something before. I'm going to share my screen with you if I can. Give me a second. Because the reason why I want to do this, let me just try something. I might do it this way, actually. Okay, give me a sec. So when there's a lot of questions in here about structuring and awake times. And so I want to show you just a general idea of what the app does. So see this graph. So basically the app has a countdown timer that's on your lock screen. So you know when the next sleep is due, you know their awake times, you know, like it's got nap predictions. So it shows you how long your little one has slept for when they're waking. So basically it talks you through, okay, we've got a timer, our little one's due to go down in 30 minutes. It says, like, it counts it down on your lock screen. Then it shows you when they're sleeping, how long they're sleeping for. It predicts the next awake time for your little one. It's called Bambii, Bambii. It is only $70 Australian for an entire year, and it has an entire solids feature. You can literally scan any item of food, get the details from it. You can put in any item of food. It tells you how to chop it, how to serve it for that age, for like to prevent choking. You can put in, I've got these 3 things. What could I make my child? You can put in there, I want to have like 5 high protein snacks because I feel like my little one's just having carby, fruity snacks. What are some high protein snacks? It'll give you 5 snacks. It records everything they eat. If you want to, likes, dislikes, allergens, and then excludes all of those things when it recommends, what you can feed it. You could be like, I've got these 2 things. If you want to do a whole meal plan, it gives you what you want. In sleep, it predicts, like I mentioned, the awake times, when to go next. It is unbelievable. It is the best. And so for that price, you get the entire app, but it has a free trial as well. This is the app here. I don't know if you can see it very well. I will send it out to you guys as well in an email, but it's called Bambii, Bambii, because a lot of you guys have written about and asked previously about like how to know structures and awake times. I can't recommend it enough. If they start to lose sleep pressure, I'd add an extra, say 10 to 15 and watch them and see when you can start to see that they're ready for it after that. Getting rid of the dummy, I would do from the beginning of the nighttime, cold turkey gone, but you can first support them if they're used to being rocked or fed as well in that way, and then move away from that as well. So you can sort of do it a little bit by, like, the way you wean a dummy is by supporting them in other ways, knowing that you'll have to then get rid of that, or you just put them down, but no dummy, and then go into a settle that way. But then it's gone. It's so much easier on your babies. You get way less crying. Yes. So if your 12-month-old is waking up for a long time at night, definitely check there's no sleep props, because sometimes there is and we don't realize. So feeds are a bit closer or they're a bit zoned out. But yes, more awake time before bed, I would absolutely do. And how you manage that resettle is going to be really important. Yes, if they fall asleep, car, pram, carrier, and they're not due asleep, give them a sleep. It's too late now. They're asleep. Let them have a sleep. There's definitely nothing, wrong with that. So how to differentiate between bored or tired? When they start to get whingy, change scenes, change what they're doing, go outside, get some fresh air, do some water play, something else, and then see if they reset. Awesome. I'm going to get to the last question. So no, Hannah, if I had a 5-month-old waking only once for a feed, I'd do the one feed at that age. Usually once they're fully established on solids, unless they naturally start sleeping through themselves, I'd usually still do the one feed. So guys, I am going to be sending you guys, just to wrap up, a link to the app. It is such a good price at the moment, because it has been launched. We've got the next series that's just come out, which is just the next upgrade, which is just amazing. That's on there. But thank you for joining me. Thank you for being with me today. It has been a pleasure. I hope you can feel my heart around this, around sleep. It means the world to me. So just to know that families are, really thriving in this time, because it's really precious and it's hard and it's all the things. But it definitely, no one has to be, a martyr to sleep deprivation. So try and block out some of the noise and do what works, for you guys. Our baby sleep program is $139 at the moment. You get an entire program, how to do things, the videos, or you can work one-on-one with me. But I'll send that in an email. Big love, guys. Take care. I hope you have the best day.